If you or someone you know is struggling or in crisis, help is available. Call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline or chat at 988lifeline.org.
Surviving Sister Wives contains adult content that may not be suitable for Latter-day Saints or sinners. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to Surviving Sister Wives.
I'm Corey.
And I'm Carly. And we're going to give you a heads up that this is going to be a little bit different of an episode. I think last week we didn't really know what was going to be included in episode 23 because they gave us a preview that looked like it was just some stories about Christine and David and Mary dating. And then after the episode aired...
Not and Mary dating. I mean, they're not going to try to... I hope
there's
not.
There's not a throuple
I don't
happening?
think so.
A throuple?
Throuple. Throuple is what they would have, but yeah, it's a throuple.
It's when
maybe
you combine trouble and throuple.
That is what would happen if Mary and Christine and David started dating. Yes, I think so.
Wow. We're...
Okay. Well, we're going to try and keep a lighter tone.
We're trying, guys.
We're trying our best. It's going to be a little bit of a different episode, though, this time around.
Because of the fact that we are in March of 2024 within the timeline of the show, and this episode is going to be about Garrison's passing.
We're going to try to keep the lighthearted tone that we just were able to achieve for a moment there, the little glimmers of that, at least for the first 10 minutes of the episode.
I was really surprised because I thought that they were going to have most of the episode be the other content, and then we would start talking about what happened with Garrison dying towards the end. But this episode is majority talking about Garrison. So trigger warning up front that we're going to be discussing topics of suicide, substance abuse, and mental health issues. So totally understand if you are not in a place to listen to this, or you've been touched by this in your life and aren't sure that this is the episode for you. Either listen to the first 10 minutes or so. We'll give you a warning before we get into the conversation that's going to be heavier, or go listen to something else, guys. We have hundreds of episodes.
We've got our recap of Poly Family that we just started up to. So if you still want something in the polygamy category, I suppose it's over on our Surviving Reality podcast, though. So be sure to check that out. And we're still doing Gypsy Rose recaps as well. So if you're looking for something a little bit more lighthearted, not so heavy to get into, but we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity for at least some sort of processing that was going to happen with this. That's the main intention for this. We're not going to be as speculative. We're not going to be joking about a lot of those topics that do come up later in the episode for good reason. It's a serious discussion. It's a serious approach that we're trying to take as far as the shock and surprise that it took everyone by surprise. And clearly it took the family by surprise as well.
Yeah, we have some ground rules that we've laid for ourselves. If it's not mentioned in this episode, if the Browns did not feel that it was a detail that they wanted to share, we are not going to be talking about it here. There was obviously a lot that came out at the time after Garrison passed. And I think there are a lot of details that people know that are not part of what was discussed. And that's kind of a boundary that we're putting up, that we're not going there if it's not something that the family has decided to share on television.
Also, you may have noticed the comments are disabled for this. So
anywhere we can disable comments, sometimes you can't.
And I mean, obviously, there's going to be discussion about it on the Discord. We have assigned rules for that too. Specifically, the rules for the watch party for this week. We're trying to be mindful of that, and we'll keep that conversation in the trigger warning channel.
All right, so let's jump in with the David and Christine kind of get together. I guess we should talk about the first, it's roughly 14 minutes of the episode that is the other stuff that happens. It is a little odd that there's kind of these lighthearted stories, and it does feel weird having this hard transition into the discussion about Garrison. I'm just wondering if they had to fill time and that this is what they put in.
If they were able to put together the episode of what they were comfortable sharing, the level of detail that they were providing, and it wasn't long enough for a full runtime. So they just had some of this other stuff. It seemed like nondescript things of Christine and David's house. They're throwing Frisbees around. They're having kind of a cookout.
It seems like it's just another day at Christine and David's house. They're having a spontaneous get together. Some of the kids who live in Utah are coming over. And like you said, they're throwing a Frisbee around in the backyard.
Multiple Frisbees, though, which that was a lot to take in. And then we didn't see McKelty and Tony.
They said they were coming, but...
Well, I mean, they were there, but we didn't see them throwing the disc. You know what I'm saying? Because, well, I don't mean that as like a euphemism for anything, but I mean like...
It has significance in their relationship. It's the origin story of their love story.
It was a big part of their wedding day, and so we didn't get to see them in action, though.
We did see Tony get pelted with the Frisbee at one point.
Oh, he got a line drive from David after the fence incident. Yes, here. But I think it's about Christine and David realizing the partnership of a marriage.
They both are very hyper independent because they had to be for a long time. David was not married for many, many years after his wife passed away.
And then 10 or 11 years, right? It was a
long time.
It's been a significant amount of time.
And then Christine was, married to Kody. There wasn't much of a partnership there. So she was the decision maker on a lot of things.
So now they're trying to figure out how to navigate. You're setting rules together. It's not just what you say goes because you're the head of the household. They're both kind of...
Except in the bedroom.
Well, I mean, they probably have safe word.
Christine has to have her dominance over her domain.
Which brings us to climb or not to climb, which maybe that's been a circumstance in the bedroom as well.
This is getting really unhinged. David's bored. He's like, give me something to do. So Christine's doing all the work. And David looks good. Doesn't he look like he's lost quite a bit of weight?
Well, they're probably burning a lot of calories.
I know. He's looking a little trimmer than he has in the past.
A little fit.
Maybe it's all the Frisbee.
Maybe it's hopping over the fence.
He was very agile.
He was ready to do it. Well, first he was going to boost Isabel over. And then Isabel was like, Mom's saying not to. So I don't think I want to get into that.
She doesn't know who to listen to. She's looking at both of them and she's in a moment of crisis. Who is the person that I should take advice from? Because Mom's saying no, David's saying go for it.
And I kind of want to jump the fence a little bit, too, if we're being completely honest, as far as what my input would be.
There was really no point to jumping it, though, because there was literally no way to get back over.
I mean, you could, but it was going to take...
How?
It was going to be like a muscle up on a vinyl fence, and that was pretty much not going to happen. Not a factor here, really. So David and Christine were disagreeing. Christine was going to walk around the fence to go get the Frisbee. David decides to just hop the fence, but then when he gets to the other side, he now realizes, I can't get back over. So he has to walk of shame all the way down the fence line and meet up with Christine, who then is asking him, did you just hop the fence?
I feel like it was really generous to say that Christine was walking over because it was more of a saunter. It was very, very, very slow, knowing other people were waiting for the Frisbee.
She was taking her time, making sure that she got there.
I kind of feel like maybe she was short on her steps for the day. And so she was like, no one jump. I'm going to go around.
All the way around.
I'll be back. I'm going to do a whole lap around the block. And I'll be back in about 10 minutes.
Plus, there's like 85 other Frisbees in the backyard. Maybe we just leave that one over there. We'll get it later.
Did you need them all?
It wasn't in someone's yard. It just looked like there were still lots that were under construction or something, too. Like, it didn't seem like that was part of somebody's backyard that you accidentally
jumped into,
threw the Frisbee over. It wasn't like an emergency situation we got to get the Frisbee right now. Otherwise, it's going to get run over with a lawnmower or something. No, I don't think so.
David is his own man. He's an autonomous person, and he's going to make his own decisions for his life. And this is his first step, is jumping the fence. Plus,
he's just trying to see if he can get Christine riled up.
Get
a little reaction out of her.
She was into it.
Some pent-up aggression, maybe.
She was like,
Save that for later.
Look at my man jumping a fence like that.
Yeah, I couldn't get back up, though. It's real tough. I wasn't expecting it to be so high on the other side.
They keep asking Isabel what she thinks about David.
Please stop asking, because that puts her in the most awkward situation where then she has to build David up, but then also not say too much where when Kody watches the show, he's going to hold it against her.
And also they're married already. Like there's no changing what happened. This is stepdaddy David. So we're just going with it. We're rolling with it. He's great.
Your opinion didn't matter before. It doesn't really matter now. It's kind of too late.
It does seem like she's really warmed up to him, though, that she really thinks that he is a great person and that he is a really good dad to Truly.
The dynamic with him and Truly was nice to see as well, because it appears that Truly scraped her knee at some point this episode. I guess we missed that, but she was having kind of a rough day, and he's consoling her as best he can in the kitchen there.
Well, they were kind of trading war stories.
Yeah, because he's got his bad knee too from hopping over the fence, but that was his call. Christine told him not to. She was going to go around and get it. That's on David at this point.
What was with the rough transition to talking about Mary, where Christine's just like, yeah, I don't really know what's going on with Mary. I think she lives at the B&B or something, but that's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, the producers were like, hey, we need to tie this into a Mary storyline. Can you just talk about Mary real quick? And she's like, I don't have any input on that at all. So yeah, just slapping something together here, real makeshift transition over to Mary's B&B, the Mare B&B.
Which is shut down. It is closed for renovations.
End of an era for the B&B part of it, where she wants to switch this over to kind of like a event space, a small event space.
Is that going to be a big moneymaker? She was mentioning baby showers or family reunions. She was like, I don't really know.
I don't know. Just
I don't want people to sleep here anymore.
I don't want to keep doing the sheets and the cleaning the beds and the food for people and stuff. Like, hire caterers.
It turns out it was a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, especially when, I don't have anybody else around to like help with this now. It's all on Jen. Jen doesn't want to do it anymore either.
Wasn't it funny that she said this was never her dream, having this be a B&B?
Okay, so she wanted the house. She didn't want the guests. I think that's what it comes down to, in a Christine sort of way, to succinctly describe that.
She needed an excuse to buy it and for the family to be convinced that it wasn't going to be a home that she could live in, so she had to turn it into a business.
And it was a business. It was an existing B&B, and then that was a way to kind of have the house pay for itself along the way, as pitching this as a business opportunity to the family.
My guess is the juice isn't really worth the squeeze. It's a lot of work and not really a whole lot of reward.
Either that, or she said that she has done some events, so maybe she has a comparison point where it's like, well, I did this many events, which were only like these number of days, and I made this much money off of those events, which is way more lucrative.
Yeah, renting it out for a wedding is going to be way more than what you'd make on many, many nights of guests staying there.
So if you just do some math on that and you say, well, it makes more sense to do it like that, but then you have to make sure that you have your bookings lined up and that all stays through.
Whoa. You're getting into like the nitty gritty details of running a business, and that's not how this family operates.
That's immediately where my head goes. Yeah. How are you going to be able to maintain this? Isn't it a ski resort nearby? And so like it's a kind of a winter town or something?
Maybe not very nearby. I think it's somewhat adjacent. But it's still not really a destination.
No, definitely not.
I am convinced that she wants this house to be renovated in a way that it could be used for events, but mainly for Worthy Up events.
Specifically for Worthy Up events.
She cannot keep renting conference rooms and hotels.
But then I think we do need to do the storyline that you keep suggesting, which is we got to lift this house up and out of Parowan and move it closer to an airport.
Yes.
If you're going to do that, you need to live in a more centralized space, I think, because you're still like 2 hours away from an airport. That's ridiculous.
I just decide I'm not going on the trip anymore if I find out how far I need to leave from the airport. It's too far of a radius for me.
That's way too much. Way too far. We kind of noticed that Mary was shifting into like a Jennifer Coolidge era.
Is she watching a lot of White Lotus?
Must be, because she's very excited about Lizzie's tablecloth, because now that we don't have all these pesky guests walking around, we don't need to use the safe for guest usage tablecloths.
We could put all the fine stuff back out.
The custom nice stuff. Let's do it now. She just wanted to run to the cabinet and grab the custom made tablecloth for the table out in the lobby there. The lobby?
Is it a lobby anymore?
Is it? Not anymore.
To be determined.
End of an era.
This is the compelling stuff that they have for us to watch, is watch Mary change a tablecloth.
Well, and speaking of let's do it now, how's your dating life, Mary?
Divorced or not?
Well, no, and I mean, like, she's thinking about dating and she's carrying a lot of the stigma into her single life, where now people are kind of leery about dating her because of her past as a polygamist, and she lives very publicly.
And in the middle of nowhere. Look, she's a rough combination of things. Then she's got people talking about what a shitty person she is, too.
Again, pick up the house.
It was just misery living with Mary for 30 years.
Change her location, at least for a little while, just to see, just to mix it up, test it out, see where you can move the house to.
Oh, I think she's constantly changing her location when she's traveling and she's on the dating apps. Maybe she'll run into Garrick Merrifield.
I hope not. Yeah, I wouldn't wish that on anyone.
We have reached the point where we are going to let you all know if you no longer want to listen, because we are going to start talking about Garrison's passing. This is the point where you will want to turn the episode off.
I guess I understand why they didn't start the episode like this, because if they did, then that would have been very jarring just to jump in on this sort of scene. It was kind of jarring just to come back from commercial and have this happen.
The tone completely shifted, and you didn't really know what was going on initially because it looks like Mary's just on the couch. I had to go back and double check, and then I realized that the slate said it was March 5th.
So we knew the day had significance, but to find out that they were filming,
I don't think anybody knew that. That explains why Janelle was traveling back to Flagstaff. Mary was in town also, and she's here with production, starting to film confessional footage about stuff that they must have filmed back in January.
They were sounding like they were talking about the carriage house and her birthday, which I don't know. Did we see birthday footage of Mary, or was that something that wasn't even used? The carriage house reveal we saw, but that was like last season now, so...
It was in this season.
Oh, it was her.
It was just this
God,
season's
it was this season.
This season's 23 episodes so far.
Oh my God. Okay, so it was that. And
that was
her
big
birthday.
Cliffhanger at the end of last season.
That was her...
Will we ever see the carriage house?
Well, and then they didn't talk about it for like 6 episodes. And then they just gave us an update randomly out of nowhere. So yeah, that was her birthday and carriage house reveal. So they were getting her reactions to that on this day. Her cell phone is ringing. It's Kody calling. So, of course, she doesn't answer because it's Kody calling. So that's weird.
So she doesn't want to pick it up because it's Kody, but also she does seem a little weirded out by the fact that he's calling her at this very moment.
Maybe if she thought it was something with the property or with Coyote Pass or something, like there's a bunch of other things that are going on. And usually if Cody's going to call you repeatedly, like something's up, something's happening. So she finds out it's an emergency. Please pick up. And then we see her reaction to it. It sounded like they cut cameras pretty quickly after, but you can see the initial response there of Mary hearing this news for the first time, where she's like, what are you saying?
She was having a hard time processing what Kody was saying to her.
So then we get everybody's reactions to it, which that was a lot. That was a lot to go through. I will say I appreciated that we heard most of the details of what was going on with Garrison. We heard it from Janelle. So I think I did appreciate that part of the episode where we were hearing it directly from Janelle as far as what happened that day, how things went down, what was going on, what was the backstory to it.
She seems to be like more of the one taking the, I don't want to say like the leadership position, but she's more of the one who's speaking more extensively on what was going on, which is something that people were a little worried about with approaching this episode is, are we going to get opinions from people? Are we going to have to hear, like I'm just going to say it, a lot from Robin? Many people didn't really want to hear what she had to say. So we really just start off with everyone retelling how they learned about what happened, which one of the reasons I think we want to talk about this episode too is that this is relatable to anyone who has lost someone. That grief and finding out the news that someone has passed away and the shock that comes with it is something that is relatable, but also like a really isolating experience.
Yeah, and I mean, it's because it's different for everyone too. So I think that's the other kind of piece and part of it. I've heard all the different analogies of it too, because it's like grief is just one of those things that it never goes away too. So like the analogy of like the ball in the box, where like when it first starts, the grief is the ball, and the ball is very large and the box is very small, so it takes up everything in there, and it's basically like bouncing around. Every time it bounces around inside the box gets a little bit bigger and the ball gets a little bit smaller, but it's still there. It never fully goes away. It's always there.
And we're in like the very initial stages of grief and everyone finding out what happened. Like, this is very raw and emotional. And it's one of the reasons why watching this was really difficult. We watched it, like 3 times?
Yeah.
And I can tell you the 3rd time, it still did not get any easier.
No.
Particularly with Mary and Christine. Like, watching them for some reason was very emotional for me.
Well, and I think, for Mary, it was a very real reaction. So not even just the first reaction.
Aside from seeing her literally finding out the news on camera, which is just crazy that happened. But we do see her talking about what she did after, what Kody said to her, and then the fact that she went to...
Her response. Yeah, because it was like she went to Kody and Robin's house and Gwen's there. And like, so she was immediately there. And then she was at Janelle's house bringing food over there because she didn't know what else to do. I'm just going to be here with you. So just kind of going through those different reactions too of how can I be a part of this? How can I help with this? But man, it was just like, you could tell how upsetting it was for her, where for Robin, when she was talking about it, there was some stuff that she didn't want to say things directly. Mm-hmm. So there wasn't that like vulnerability that was there too.
Maybe that's what it is. Everyone had like a different feeling attached to the retelling of their firsthand experience. And Robin's was very detached.
Yeah, and it was more so about like Kody's experience or like what Kody was going through.
That's also a little bit concerning.
Well, yeah. And so it's just between those different things, I would say that like that's the other thing that kind of caught me by surprise with Christine's reactions, because I think we were talking about that too. When you think about how Christine was like the mother figure, the stay-at-home mom who was raising all of these kids when they lived in Lehigh, and how the stories that she shared, it was mostly about him growing up or like the things that he had loved, or those
Yeah, you're skipping ahead to talking about the funeral that they had, but
I mean, like it's just it was part of those things that she was sharing. But like there were a few things, the verbiage I think that Christine uses in some of the descriptors too caught me off guard, where she was saying things like, oh, we all knew Garrison was sad. And it's like, well, I don't think sad is an accurate description. Is that a way to kind of soften that? Or like, is that just the way that she describes it?
I mean, maybe there's also an element of it where maybe she doesn't want to admit to herself, like really the struggle that he was going through. But I do think that we need to normalize using the actual language around what's going on. And he was depressed. We hear that from Janelle. He struggled with anxiety and depression, and that kind of spiraled into substance abuse with binge drinking during COVID.
Yeah, like started with COVID and then kind of ramped up in like the year prior to him passing away. So the self-medication, I think that was the route, or like the main thing that they were saying was like, this wasn't completely out of the ordinary. It was something that he had been doing and people were aware of it.
Sounds like not only were they aware, but they had offered him different avenues of help, and they just weren't able to get him to take advantage of those things. Or he would do really well for a while. I mean, that's not unusual for anyone who struggles with binge drinking. And then he would go through a period where he would start drinking heavily again. And it was not unusual for Janelle to have nights like this where she would get calls or texts from him, and he would kind of blow up her phone, and then he would go radio silent. And in the morning, he would, reemerge again.
Because he had like passed out or whatever, had gone on. I think that's the part here for me where it was like the systems that were in place too just goes to show that like, yeah, this was an ongoing thing, because she was even talking about how Logan and Hunter, she had reached out to them and was like, hey, can you check in on Garrison? And they kind of took it and ran with it of like, yeah, we got it. Don't worry about it. Because Janelle was in North Carolina. She was traveling from North
Carolina to Flagstaff.
Yeah. And like, for those times, the weeks prior or whatever too, it's like, she had moved away. She was living out of state, so she's further away.
Which is a scary experience for someone who, has a loved one who's struggling with something.
So that, I guess what I'm getting at is like that the things that they had in place of like, oh, we'll check up on him and we'll make sure, we get in contact with him and stuff. It's like having those systems in place just shows that it's an ongoing thing. Like this has been, they're coming up with solutions.
They had an approach for what they do when something like this would happen with Garrison.
And like how to work around this. Yeah.
It was really upsetting to hear that this started during COVID, just because that was a big part of the show and he participated a lot in what happened during COVID. And obviously it's tough because of the family dynamic that was taking place. But this is unfortunately not uncommon. There are a lot of people who really had a hard time with the isolation that came from COVID and lockdowns. And some people spiraled into issues with substance abuse, or they had like an uptick in mental health issues. A lot of the things that ultimately lead to a suicide are things that need to be addressed in society. Like, it broke my heart when she mentioned that he would call her multiple times a day, and she really just thought that he was just looking for connection, that it seemed like he was lonely.
Yeah, and it might have been on, as far as like the day that she was talking about was the day where this happened. And so it's like, yeah, he could have been spiraling. And so he just continued he was looking for that connection. He was calling multiple people because he had reached out to Logan and Hunter, or had talked with them too. And so there were multiple people that he was trying to connect with throughout that day before it happened too, which I think just only adds to the shock of it. And I mean, Kody was saying that he was stunned when he heard about it too.
Yeah, let's touch on what Kody had to say about finding out, because I'm a little worried that he's going to get some criticism for, I mean, obviously he and Robin are just targets anyway for criticism generally, but because of the state of his relationship with Garrison, I think that already enrages a lot of people. And then his retelling of the story, to me, as someone who's done trauma therapy, I think that there were little indicators that this was a traumatic event for everybody who was involved.
Yeah.
But the way that he retells finding out felt very the way that I described the traumatic event that I had to process, where it's almost like you are watching it from the outside. Like it's like watching a TV. Like you're seeing the scene happen in front of you, but you're on the outside of it.
There were a couple of instances where that happened, where Janelle was talking about how she doesn't remember the next few minutes, that memory loss, the memory lapse.
That she may have disassociated the entire drive.
Oh, yeah.
Over to Garrison's house. Yeah,
because then there was like phone calls that were being made. I think Maddie and Caleb said something about that too, about like, calling siblings and telling them what happened. And like, yeah, that's all trauma of kind of that third person view outside yourself, where this is happening and I'm not really fully experiencing it. You're kind of distancing from it to try to protect yourself.
Which is something to think about in framing this as a traumatic event as you're watching it and taking in the stories from everybody.
Because I think what I'm worried about is where there's people who are trying to assign reason or try to find who's responsible. And in this case, it would be turning to people where Garrison didn't have a good relationship, i.e. Kody and Robin. So seeing their reactions, seeing their input on this can be kind of triggering from that, because we do know that there was tension. There was a lot of unresolved issues between them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to have that same level of sympathy in this situation, because then there is a feeling of responsibility. I think Kody felt the responsibility, though.
He says a few things throughout the episode that make it clear that he has a lot of regrets, and that he does, to some extent, maybe feel that there's some guilt there.
I think there's a lot of guilt there. Like, I think he had and he's trying any way that he can to kind of still connect with Garrison after the fact. And I think that's why he did take it upon himself for his level of involvement
with the funeral plans.
In the funeral planning.
Yeah.
And then even just the little things that we saw him do in this episode, when Kody is out by the fire. And that was something that Christine had mentioned, where Garrison, when he was little, he always loved fire. So just to like have that as like a little memorial thing too.
He's sitting outside staring into the fire of a fire pit.
And which Robin comes out to check in on him and stuff too. But just to like see even those little things,
he's looking for connection to Garrison.
It's the connection. It's those connection points, and to see him kind of try to explore that in any way that he can, because then that's what he's talking about too, of like the what ifs, when he's running through all of these scenarios in his mind and people are telling him, "Ooh, don't do that." And he's going, this is my only connection point to Garrison still, is to like have kind of not that fantasy, but just to think through what could have been if things were different. So I think that was illuminating for Kody. And that's what we had hoped when this happened was, oh my gosh, I hope he realizes like the larger impact here. And maybe that would have him shift his responsibilities around, or, you know, his focus and attention.
Realizing that anger isn't really that important. Because that's what he couldn't get past, to be able to extend an olive branch and say, hey, I was really upset about everything that happened, but let's figure out a way to move forward. And they both were stubborn in wanting to do that.
Right. It's a horrible way to learn that.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrible. But I think he did get that message.
I want to go back to talking about like guilt associated, especially with a suicide. Suicide is extremely complex, and there's not one reason why someone makes that decision. I want to just say that up front.
Well, I think, when the news broke, there were a lot of
people look for a why.
Yeah, understanding.
And it's also the family, the people closest to the person who dies by suicide. They're trying to figure out why this happened as well. And there is a lot of guilt within yourself of, what if I had done something different? The what ifs.
Because a lot of people had that too, because I think Janelle had even mentioned that, or Christine. There were multiple people who were saying, what if things could have been different or had this changed?
You play out that entire day and start to think, well, if this had happened, would this person have been alone? Or, what would the outcome have been if something had just been slightly different? So I do think we have to have a little empathy when we think about like where they're all coming from, that it's not just Kody that's going to have some feelings of guilt and regret. And
I mean, even Kody had mentioned that he was apologizing to people at the funeral services or the memorial services that they were partaking in.
That was rough. He didn't even know what to say. He just kept saying, I'm sorry.
He just kept apologizing. So like to have that sort of reaction to it, like obviously he's carrying guilt from that too, which is terrible. It's awful.
It's already really difficult to live with the reality of something like this, but to have it be your own child and know that you were not on good terms with them, I really just can't imagine that.
I think what makes this so hard is that everybody liked Garrison. Garrison was nobody had anything disparaging to say about Garrison at all. Because, I mean, we had McKelty and Tony and I mean, everybody who chimed in, it was just everything good about Garrison. Like, he brought so much and didn't make it a big show of it either.
I think we've all learned, like, Garrison was extremely talented. He was an amazing photographer. He was very creative. He had that whole line of shirts that he was working on up until COVID started. He rescued cats. Like, there was a lot that we learned about him in like the weeks after he had passed.
And I think that goes back to like the humility of it. I mean, he wasn't touting any of that or like going on full display for that of like how great he is. It was like always in that reserved, respectful.
Well, one of the things that they've talked about too was like his struggle with comparison of, where other people were at in life. And it's sad that someone may not have recognized the many gifts that they had. Christine, it sounds like, had a really big part in maybe like, I don't know if they would have called it a eulogy. It sounds like they had a viewing. I don't know if it was really a formal funeral or if that's what they're saving for when they go to Wyoming.
I think the Wyoming one was going to be like a larger family gathering. So this was like the initial one with just immediate family, I think.
That'd be really difficult for Christine because, again, like you said, she was like the primary caregiver at home when he was little. And she gets really choked up trying to explain the significance of Dragonheart and the quote from the end of the movie, which is "Into the Stars," and the fact that she said that at the end of when she spoke during the service that they had. And she was okay speaking until she said that, and she happened to look at McKelty at the same time. And that's kind of where she lost it.
Well, and a couple of the siblings now have tattoos to commemorate that, and it's become kind of a bonding thing or like a solidarity thing that they've been able to find in that as well.
You can look up the end of the movie if you want. It's on YouTube. I don't think I can describe it because I'm pretty sure I'll start to cry.
And Leon's posted that like line of text before too, as part of the memorial,
like the quotes from the movie.
in memoriam and stuff like that too. So
it was just, again, just really sad to think about Christine taking care of all the kids when they were little and them watching this movie over and over again and having it be one of Garrison's favorite movies and having that quote be something that can bring them all some peace when they think about Garrison.
And like we said too, with the nighttime photography, that was a big part of Garrison's interests and things that he enjoyed and particularly was fond of as well. So it's that other kind of connection point back that you can kind of cling to in these times where you miss him or you're thinking about him.
I was shocked that we saw Gabe. Because we do know, and Janelle mentioned it earlier in the episode, that Gabe was the one who went over to Garrison's house and that he was the first person to deliver the news of what had happened, that he called Janelle and told her, that he had found Garrison, that he had died by suicide. He looked like he had been crying a lot already. So
I'm glad that they didn't go into, at the time, there were reports, there was information that was out there that felt intrusive because it was way too much information that was being divulged. So I'm glad that they didn't go to the level that they could have as far as what was included in the details of that process.
Because they wouldn't have really been telling us anything that many people hadn't discovered on their own.
Well, not even discovered. Yeah, but it's just like that wasn't.
I'm going to have something to say about it.
Yeah.
You don't have the right to know the details of someone's most traumatic experience in their life.
Yeah, and just because you can submit a Freedom of Information Act and get a police report and have access to body cam footage and things like that.
Doesn't mean you should.
Doesn't mean that needs to be part of something that's broadcast out to every single person in a viewing audience. Not appropriate. So now we do know, like, at least as part of the show, Gabe was the one who found Garrison. So that's where we kind of see some of that concern start to rise, because that was immediately our thought too, was when we found out about that at the time was, oh my God, is Gabe okay? Because this is a lot for him to deal with now. And we find out that we were not the only ones who were having that concern at the time, because Janelle's sister Carrie is very concerned as well. Because Janelle's kind of manic a little bit.
Janelle was kind of making me laugh a little bit because this was really relatable for anybody who tries to distract themselves in moments like this, that she has access to, I don't know, what do you think it was? 3 dozen eggs on the counter behind her. And
quadrillion eggs.
She's going to bake something with every single one of them.
There was there was the busybody energy where Janelle just needs to focus on something. And this kind of led to just more concern for me though, too, is because it's like, is she avoiding it? Because
are you taking the time to process?
You need to process. Yeah. And like, so that's going to be the other part of this is like, you can't just bottle it up and glaze over it. You are going to need to do that. I think she was, because it kind of hits her. And even in that conversation where she's saying, hold on a minute, because she was explaining, I have good days, I have bad days, I have good minutes, and I have bad minutes. And then you can tell she kind of thought about it a little bit too much. And she's like, I'm going to just run the egg beater real quick for a couple minutes and gather my thoughts.
And then I'll be back.
And then I'll be back in a minute. Yeah. And so it's just like, run that as long as you need to at this point.
I think Carrie looked frightened. Like, she's looking at her sister and thinking, she sees the things about Janelle that are, not maybe part of her everyday personality. And then she, like you said, also seemed quite concerned about Janelle's response about how Gabe was doing, because she seems to be under the impression that like he's doing good. Actually, like he was in a pretty good place before Garrison died. So that already was a better start than it could have been.
What it seemed to be was that in his place with his mental health journey, and he'd been going to therapy, he'd been processing through things. And I think she was speaking more so about where the relationship stood between him and Kody.
Maybe.
Or parental, because it seemed like that was the last conversation that we saw with Janelle and Gabe when they were committing their crimes against eggs. and so
they burnt the shit out of that egg.
He burnt that egg real bad. But that was kind of what they were talking about at that time. So it seemed like that was what Janelle's understanding was that Gabe had kind of approached this. He had processed through a lot of that. He was in a good place. But then she was referring to this as finding Garrison, making this discovery, and now going through this has set Gabe back. I think that's an understatement.
Yeah.
I would argue.
I think we're seeing a little bit of how Janelle copes with things, and maybe some things aren't the healthiest. And there was a little bit of minimization. Minimization,
yes. And like the good news, though, is that we don't have like where Kody has regrets. I think he was feeling guilt and remorse for how things ended because he was saying the stuff about he didn't even get to say goodbye. And like, he wishes things could have been different. We don't really have that from Janelle, though. So like, It's interesting to see like the different places and like the different ways that it impacts, because she was talking about how we did everything we could to try to help. We offered him as much support, and
Maddie and Caleb tried to get him to move to North Carolina.
Yeah. I mean, like there was active opportunities of people trying to get him out of that scenario that he found himself in. But then it's just like, sometimes you can't force someone out of a situation, though. Mm-hmm. Like they have to want that for themselves too.
She does appear to have some peace, at least, in knowing that there's nothing left unsaid or undone that she wishes had been different.
I think that was the rewarding part of that, or something. Not even rewarding, because like it's still awful, but it's just she was at peace with it. Yeah. And I think it was nice to see that she didn't have any regrets or, like you said, anything left unsaid or things that she wishes she could have done. They did try as much as they could to
help him,
to provide the support that they could at that time. And at least now they're having more kind of direct conversations about mental health. So that seemed like another positive that has kind of come out of this, is that she's able to check in with Gabe more directly.
That's healthy that they're actually having a dialogue around how are you doing? Because everybody is having a hard time with this, which kind of opens up people being able to be more vulnerable with one another and explain what it is they may actually be struggling with. We're only maybe a few weeks out from Garrison having passed, and the next episode is going to be a continuation of what was happening in their lives leading up to his funeral, or I don't know if it was a celebration of life. I don't want to keep calling it a funeral.
Yeah. There were certain things that indicated that, like the National Guard service that took place, like there was a photo that was there for that Kody had in his house. It was at the She-Ra Chateau before he went out to sit by the fire towards the end of the episode. So there has been
filmed after.
Yeah, there has been some time, or if that was in preparation before that or anything, that they provided it or something. And so that was just what he had ahead of time. It kind of indicates that it could have been some passage of time, but they're still processing through this. It's still very fresh. He's talking about going and picking up the ashes,
the
urn, and driving them up to Wyoming. So this could be, pretty close after still from when this actually took place.
They all decided that it makes the most sense to bury him or bury his urn in Wyoming, because obviously that's where Cody's dad's ranch is. That's where a lot of their family are.
Next to Grandma Cheryl, too. And so, it's with family, and Garrison loved Wyoming. So it just makes sense to... This becomes kind of Cody's main goal here, is he wants to take Garrison home now.
This is his... And I don't want this to come across negatively, because it's not. His exertion of control in a very powerless situation, that he has decided that his task to complete is to get Garrison to Wyoming. And so that's what he's focused on.
We have joked multiple times that Kody is a very task-oriented person. So I think he needs a quest. He needs a mission. He needs something to focus his energy on. So then that way he has that. Because we kind of saw that with Janelle too, with all the baking, everything that she's doing. She is kind of surrounding herself and diving into...
It's her coping mechanism.
Yeah, it's the way to cope. Or it's the way to, not even to cope, it could be a way to process too. Mm-hmm. Because it gives you a safe way to navigate some of that, but then also kind of self-soothe in a lot of different ways too throughout that process, because it is very hard. It's challenging and it's painful to go through that process. So I think for Kody, maybe he's looking at this as this could be one last road trip. You know, this could have been something that they could have done together if they took a trip of some kind or something, you know, like these other scenarios that he was always running as the what ifs. This could be a way to kind of live one of those out potentially too.
I am hoping that it's more of like, this is like time to spend together before, you know, they officially bury him.
Yeah, it was like
he takes the time to maybe say some things that he wishes that he had said.
A way to make things up in, you know, in some way, shape, or form. And even if it's just for Kody's peace of mind, like I hope it just gives him closure.
Yeah.
At least as far as assigning himself this sort of task and then continuing on to make sure that he sees this through. At least I can see this through and do this one last thing for Garrison.
That's kind of where we leave them at the end of this episode. We did get a description for next week. Janelle visits the Flagstaff Humane Society to view a plaque that they have dedicated to her son Garrison. Kody and Robin's family travels to Wyoming, where the rest of the Browns will eventually join them for his burial. So
it sounds like next week's not going to be much easier.
No.
I mean, the initial shock of it isn't going to be part of it. So I'm hoping that it is looking at, it sounds like with the Humane Society stuff, it's going to go with more of what's the positivity, what's the impact, what's the legacy that we can see from this horrible, terrible tragedy that has happened, and what's some of the good that we can see out of it instead.
I hope that some of you guys found this beneficial, and we really tried hard to be respectful and to toe the line of doing a recap of the episode, but doing it in a way that gives it the respect and the gravity that it deserves. So hopefully next week, you'll feel like we're continuing to do that, but I totally understand. This is rough for everybody.
Yeah. And I mean, we'll keep you posted to similar approach to what we did this week. So if you want to listen in, we'll give you a heads up at the beginning, and we'll kind of treat it the same way that we did this episode.
We'll keep trying to make it feel like it's a safe space.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. See you next time.